Hello and welcome to Pock and Rob. This is my next video in my series ranking the tracks of each of the Beatles' studio albums. We've reached the 7th part and therefore 1966 and Revolver. Before I go in and rank the 14 tracks, I would remind you to subscribe if you haven't already done so, to click the thumbs up to like the video, the bell for notifications of future content, and give a share and send this to somebody who might like the video. So let's go in and rank the 14 tracks. And at number 14, I have placed Love You Too. This is a George Harrison track. It's one of 3 tracks that made it onto Revolver. This is often, again, cited as being the album where George really started to come into his own as a songwriter. Funnily enough, in 1997, they did a Q magazine ranking the best albums of all time. Revolver came top. And there was an interview with McCartney, and McCartney said this great song and that great song. And then he got to Love You Too, and he said, like, not a great song. And he said, oh, perhaps I shouldn't have said that. I kind of agree with Paul. I think Love You Too is the weakest track on Revolver, which is still to say that it's better than virtually anything else coming out in 66. At number 13, I have placed Yellow Submarine. So this is Ringo's song from the album. Widely believed for years that this was solely composed by Paul. And the special edition that came out a couple of years ago reveals a very early demo of the first verse done by John. And actually, when you think about in the town where I was born lived a man who sailed to sea, it's actually about his father. And so it means that Yellow Submarine, which has been always somewhat derided, even though it gave its name to a great animated film, has now suddenly gained a bit more stature because it's now been discovered to be a partly Lennon song. That kind of thing irritates me. I've always liked Yellow Submarine. I was going to say tolerated, but I think that's a little bit harsh. It's a little bit out of place on Revolver, true, but it is still, it's a really enjoyable song. And well, it just happens to be my number 13. At number 12, I have placed Good Day Sunshine. My first exposure to Good Day Sunshine was not on Revolver. It was actually on hearing it on Give My Regards to Broad Street soundtrack from Paul. To me, Good Day Sunshine opens Revolver. Now, it doesn't. Taxman does. But to me, it opens Revolver because my first exposure to the album was a cassette copy in the 80s from my local record library. Those cassette re-releases they're an odd thing to go and listen to. But Good Day Sunshine, as an opening track, kind of makes sense. As the opening track on side 2, a little bit less sense. Good Day Sunshine, number 12. And number 11, it's another George song, and it's I Want to Tell You. I don't like I Want to Tell You as much as I like both of his songs on Rubber Soul. And I think I Want to Tell You, the best bit about it is the harmonies. I really like the harmonies on I Want to Tell You. Number 10, She Said, She Said. So this is an account of a acid trip that John Lennon was going through. And if you go back a few of my videos and go back to the Help video, I make the point that the very first seeds of the Beatles' breakup lie in Yesterday. Because it was the first time that only one Beatle had appeared on a song, and Capitol started to... There's a great video out there by Parlogram Auctions about Capitol considering, could we put out a Paul McCartney solo album, repackage all of our stuff, and just call it Paul McCartney Solo. And somewhere along the line it was kiboshed, quite rightly so. So the very first seeds of the Beatles' breakup lie in the fact that Paul did Yesterday and did it on his own. The second seed of the Beatles' breakup lies in She Said, She Said, and again involves Paul. Paul, I think he is on this track, but he walked out of the studio after a disagreement. The very beginning of disagreements and the breakup of the band and the disharmony that would lead to them are in She Said, She Said. And whatever it was that Paul lost his rag over and walked away from the recording session at that point. Knowing that, means that I put it at number 10 rather than any higher. At number 9, Dr. Robert, another Lennon song. I genuinely don't think that the Lennon songs on Revolver are as good as the Lennon songs on Rubber Soul. And Dr. Robert is a perfect example of that. Please don't get me wrong. Any of the songs that I've mentioned so far aren't bad. I don't dislike or hate any of them. But there's a feel to Dr. Robert that I just can't get behind. And number 8, Tomorrow Never Knows. So when I first did this ranking, Love You Too was still number 14, but Tomorrow Never Knows was number 13. My most recent listen to the Revolver album, and indeed the 2-disc outtakes album that's with the box set, changed my view to a certain extent of Tomorrow Never Knows. It was the first thing recorded for Revolver, and the usage of tape loops, it was the epitome of using the studio as an instrument. That meant that their time as a touring band was about to be over. They didn't play anything from Revolver on their last their tour stuff, and some of the stuff was out there. If you remember, Yesterday and Today album featured some of the tracks from Revolver, but Tomorrow Never Knows could never have been replicated on stage at the time with the technology they'd got. Number 7, we're now halfway through. Taxman, opening track, and George's finest song on this release, and arguably his finest song up to this point. George is angry. He's angry about how much tax they're paying. 95 pence in the pound, hence 1 for you, 19 for me. And Taxman is a good song, but there are 2 major contributions that make it a great song, and they're both from Paul. It's the bass line, as memorably stolen by the Jam to make the song start, and the guitar break. You naturally assume that the lead guitarist would have the lead guitar break, particularly in his own song. It was a Paul lead guitar part. He was asked to play something insane, and he did that. So good that they then reprised it at the end of the song. They took the tape and they put it on the end again to fade the song out. And it's those 2 contributions that demonstrate that when Paul was on the top of his game on somebody else's songs, it's some of the best musical material he'd produce. Taxman at 7. At number 6, it's a Paul song, and it is it's his tribute to Pot. Got to Get You Into My Life, where it's another one of those songs when you listen to the work in progress version, you'd kind of get a feeling that this song wasn't particularly wonderful, and then you hear the one where they put the horns over it, the actual proper release thing, and you think, man, the horns transform the song from being okay into terrific. Number 5, a song that John wrote as a result of being constantly woken up by Paul when he was wanting to laze around. I'm Only Sleeping. Also includes backwards guitar, which was omitted from the version that the Americans got, because they got it on Yesterday and Today. It's a great John song, and again, I think the bass work on it is terrific. Those backwards guitars really work. And I'm Only Sleeping, number 5. And number 4, the other half of the double A side, released simultaneously with the record, Eleanor Rigby. Eleanor Rigby is an incredible song. What saddens me about it is that all of the Beatles contributed bits into the lyric, and for me that should have been credited. It is a Lennon and McCartney song, but Harrison included stuff. Ringo was involved in writing it, coming up with lines like Father Mackenzie, and John put a fair bit into it. So it's not just a Paul McCartney song. It never was. But it's kind of thought to be because Paul sings it. It's got the string quartet inspired by the music of Bernard Herrmann and his score for Psycho. And I think George came up with the look at all the lonely people line. It really should have been credited to all four of them. At number 3, I have placed And Your Bird Can Sing. The twin guitars, the twin vocal, and for me, And Your Bird Can Sing is easily John's finest song on Revolver. You hear the giggling version and you think how much fun this band were having in the studio at the time. I think John himself considered this a bit throwaway, and I don't agree, because the musicianship and the melody and the harmony come together to take something that could lyrically be considered throwaway and turn it into something fantastic. And Your Bird Can Sing at 3. At number 2, what Paul has probably cited as being what he thinks is the best song he's ever written, and it's Here, There and Everywhere. Paul took his inspiration from things like Cheek to Cheek by Irving Berlin, where you had an opening section and then you went into the main song, and often that opening section, when people performed it later on, kind of gets forgotten. Take like something like Bewitched, which isn't Irving Berlin, I think it's Rodgers and Hart. You've got the opening thing of He's a fool and don't I know it, but a fool can have his charms. That whole section often gets forgotten. When you hear Sinatra do Bewitched, he doesn't do that bit. He just goes, I'm wild again, beguiled again, etc. And so that was part of the inspiration behind Here, There and Everywhere, the kind of stuff he'd always grown up listening to. And he's really proud of his lyrical construction, that the way that the verses flow together into the next line. So the first verse starts with here and it ends with the word then, and the next one is about there, and it's a genuinely brilliantly written song. I'd urge you to go to his podcast and listen to the Life in Lyrics episode on Here, There and Everywhere, because he really is genuinely 100% proud of that song. I placed it at number 2 because at number 1 I've placed For No One, which I think is a perfect song. For No One is just melodically perfect, lyrically brilliant, and even in the years where they were fighting each other, John couldn't get away from how brilliant McCartney's songs were on Revolver, particularly Here, There and Everywhere and For No One. He never stinted in his praise of those two songs in particular. And for me, For No One is the best thing on Revolver. So that concludes my rundown of the 14 tracks of Revolver. Let me know in comments below what you thought of it, maybe what your ranking is. I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, I'd remind you to subscribe, like, hit the bell, share the video, and thanks for watching.